In today's video, we're going to talk about 10 Pokemon that, when you look at them independent of the rest of the Pokemon, you'd say, wow, they have a lot going for them. And, and when you look at the tier that they ended up in Gen 9, you say, wow, how did you end up here? Because it seems like these Pokemon should be a lot better than they ended up being this gen. So without any more preamble, let's get right into it. First off, I want to talk about Orthworm. If we look at Orthworm, we see it's in ZU, so it's at the bottom of the list, right? It can't even hack it in PU. Now, obviously, Orthworm isn't going to be a fantastic Pokemon. If you look at the stat spread, you're seeing barely any stats that are good. Really, it only has defense stat, and when you don't have any other stat besides your defense over base 100, it's going to be hard for you to really make a splash, right? Now, of course, Orthworm has a fantastic ability in Earth Eater, and it actually sort of pairs sort of well with a different Pokemon that is not on this list, but is Darkspun. And so I want to bring it up at the same time. You can sort of see Darkspun has a similar thing going on to Orthworm. They have a prominent weakness, one's ground. Well, I guess this one doesn't have so much a weakness, but they have a really good resist or immunity. Darkspun's weakness is the fact that fire types resist fairy, right? And so it isn't going to take super effective damage from fire types, but a fire type can come in and still wall out the play rough. Also, it's a physical attacker, doesn't like to do will-o-wisp. So this sort of mitigates that. And Well-Baked Body and Earth Eater are both coveted abilities in almost any ability, and other metagames like that. Shared Power is also another great example of where you really want Earth Eater if you can get it, or Levitate is actually better in Shared Power because of Sticky Web. So we're not talking about Darkspun today. It's not pretty surprising to me why Darkspun is so low. Look at that HP stat, look at that attack stat, it's not really doing too much. Orthworm, on the other hand, has a few things going for it that makes it stand out in my mind compared to something like Darkspun, which is, first of all, it gets that huge HP defense stat, and it gets to run Iron Press. So it can run Iron Defense, or it could even run Coil. Coil is a fantastic move because it gives you the accuracy raise, and then you can run the Iron Tail, right? And so that's such an accurate move that normally it's in the usually useless moves category, but for Orthworm it's actually fine because you have Coil. Now, you usually swap this out for something else. Sometimes, of course, you have the Ranbat set, which has got Resto Chesto, and that's cool, but it's not really a modern set. Resto Chesto is something that you might run in Gen 4, Gen 5, but now we have so many good items and so many good things that Pokemon can do that having to run Resto Chesto is sort of embarrassing. It's like, going to your parents' house for a family gathering and having to tell people that you're still single and you're 40 years old, right? It was fine to be single when you were 20. It's not fine to be single when you're 40. Running Resto Chesto was fine back in Gen 5. It's not fine anymore. You can't do that anymore. So having to do that, not great for Earthworm. Now, Earthworm, of course, does have sort of this elephant in the room, which is Shed-Tail. Shed-Tail would have banned Earthworm because Earthworm with Shed-Tail is quite serviceable, as opposed to Cyclizar and Sceptile, which have fast Shed-Tails. Earthworm gets a slow Shed-Tail, which, while it means it has to take a hit, it usually can take a hit, especially in front of a physical attacker, and then it gets to pass the freeze substitute into the Pokemon unmolested, whereas a lot of times with Sceptile or with Cyclizar, you pass the substitute only for it to get broken right away on switch-in. So Orthworm has a really strong role as a Shed-Tail user. However, because Shed-Tail is an annoying and broken strategy in singles, it got banned, and Orthworm was able to stay in the tiers, but without having access to that move, it has fallen all the way down to ZU. This set is not able to break through a lot of things. For example, Wish and Haze Vaporeon can just scald you. It doesn't care about your body press that much, and it can haze away any boosts you might get. Any ghost type, especially if you don't run Iron Tail, means they completely just wall you. So you're really not doing well with this set overall. Of course, an unprepared team might be swept by it, but overall, I just go into something like my Chandelure, and suddenly you're hard-walled. I toast you with a fire move. You can't do anything. Your coverage is fine. You have, of course, rock, ground coverage, which, is better than even something like Klinklang gets. You do have spikes and stealth rock, but so many Pokemon in the lower tiers get spikes and stealth rock. That's really nothing to boast about. And your attack stat is only 85, so really, all those coverage moves are going to bounce off anything that comes in on you. So it's not surprising why Earthworm is that low. That's why it's only number 10 on this list. But I will say, given all of its good things it has going for it, Coil, Earth Eater, Shed Tail, and a really good defense stat, it is sort of surprising to see it all the way in ZU. Next up, let's talk about Brute Bonnet. Brute Bonnet is also in ZU. Now, having a 4x weakness to Bug, specifically U-turn, and being this far down is not terribly surprising. We've seen, especially as U-turn has become more prominent and powerful in recent gens, Pokemon even like Celebi, which were otherwise good, fall a lot down. You see something like Iron Leaves is not doing so hot. But just being 4x weak to Bug, and U-turn specifically, isn't necessarily enough to make you fall all the way down. Of course, VGC players will know that Brute Bonnet is actually really good in VGC. It excels in Trick Room, and of course it can use Spore and Sucker Punch, be really annoying. Now, of course, one of the downsides for Brute Bonnet of the sleep ban in Smogon singles was that it no longer gets to use Spore. So one of the main selling points of its existence is now denied to it. So similar to Earthworm, it's not too surprising to see it down here when its main and most powerful option is banned. Now, Brute Bonnet, unless I missed something, is the lowest Paradox Pokemon in all of the tiers. Even Screamtail is still hacking it in NU, and I don't think there's any other Pokemon below it. Right, all of them are OU, UU, or Uber, except for Screamtail, which is NU, and actually Screamtail does have some viability in upper tiers. And then all the way down is Brute Bonnet on the photosynthesis side, and then if we look at Quark Drive, things are a little more varied here, because we do have RUBL in Iron Leaves, and then we have NUBL in Iron Thorns. So, again, most of them are in UU or in OU, and only one of them is in Ubers, which is sort of funny. Most of them, though, are doing pretty well, with the exception of Iron Thorns and Iron Leaves, but even both of those are above Screamtail. Brute Bonnet really is in a league of its own in being bad. Another funny thing about Brute Bonnet that you might want to consider is that in Gen 9, with the Terra mechanic, you can actually Terra out of your bad typing into a new typing. Poison is a usual suspect because Brute Bonnet then is going to resist the bug moves, right? But it doesn't really do anything for it offensively, like you're not running Poison Jab on this guy, right? And if we look at its physical moves, fighting is a good option because it does have close combat. And you get Sucker Punch, close combat, Seed Bomb. You think, hey, look at this, it can do stuff. You've got Synthesis, Stun Spore. There's got to be some things you can do with this, right? And 127 attack, 111 HP, 99 in both defenses. And actually, the speed being this bad isn't even a problem. First of all, and I hate to invoke this guy's name, but King Gambit is even slower than Brute Bonnet, right? And 100 HP versus 111. Really, Brute Bonnet is just about as bulky as King Gambit, and 4x weak to fighting versus 4x weak to bug. You decide which one of those is more detrimental. I'm not really sure, but I will say one of them is OU and one of them is ZU. King Gambit, of course, does have access to an extremely powerful ability in Supreme Overlord, And Supreme Overlord does have bigger upside than Photosynthesis on the attack stat. However, first of all, Root Bonnet technically I think could invest in like defense, for example. You wanted to make this impish, then you could stack that up like this, and now you've got a defense boost. I don't know exactly how you do it. You do this, and then drop this down. Okay, something like this. Now you get a defense boost, and you put the rest into whatever. I don't really care. HP probably. Of course, nobody would ever do this. I'm just saying you have more flexibility than King Gambit, which would only have a boost in his attack. And the other good thing about Photosynthesis, even if you are using it in the sensible and optimal way, which of course would be to run Adamant, and then you get the booster attack, is that it's immediate and it's on command, ignoring things like red card. So King Gambit has to wait for all of its friends to die, and it is a powerful comeback mechanic, but a lot of times you'll be in the middle of a game and you'll be like, man, if I had fallen 4, my sucker punch would kill this guy, but it's only fallen 2. I wish some of my guys were dead. That's a weird kind of mentality that King Gambit has forced upon players, but it is the fact of the matter. Root Bonnet doesn't have to wait for that. It will get its 1.3x whenever it comes out, as long as you have the booster energy, or technically, you could run this on Sun. Is it optimal on Sun? No. Even manual Sun probably would prefer to have other things, but I have a grass type in Sun. It's not the worst option. So, you know. Now, Dark and Grass is an interesting typing because you have a lot of competition, like an extreme amount of competition. You've got Meowscarada, which is a great Pokemon, mostly because it's got Axel and Protean. So we'll ignore that fact. Zarude, which is actually pretty decent. And then it drops all the way down to Piu, where Wo-Chien is, and that's hilarious. Wo-Chien is not on this list, but it also maybe should deserve to be there, just because all of the other Ruin guys, they're either Uber or OU, and strongly OU at that. And Piu is where Wo-Chien finds itself. And Wo-Chien often also Terra Poisons in the same way Root Bonnet would. And then Ziyu has most of the bad ones, which people have been used to being bad, right? Shiftry has found a bit of a niche in this gen because it got Wind Rider, which is a really cute thing, and it synergizes really well with its Tailwind that it has. But it's a one-trick pony, and if you wanted a one-trick pony, it might be preferable to use something like Revavroom, because Revavroom has shift gear, and so you get your attack and your speed, and that's basically the same as Wind Rider Tailwind. You then can use a lot better options in terms of move coverage, and Shifter does have some cool options, but I think that Revavroom is just better in general, has better typing, has a better ability, and it doesn't rely on having the Tailwind up, because usually Wind Rider is not coming in to benefit Shifter at all. So it's not surprising to see most of these in the places that they are. Root Bonnet, you could argue, is also not that surprising to see it in the place that it is, but it is, 100 BST better than Cacturne or Shiftry, more or less, and it's tied with Wo-Chien. It's a very optimized one as well, right? Wo-Chien is wasting its stats all over the place, and while 79 Spatak isn't great, it could technically be a bit more optimized. That's about as optimized as a normal Pokemon gets, and the fact that it still can't do anything in singles, especially because it lost Spore, is pretty crazy to me. Next up, let's talk about Sandaconda. Sandaconda is also in the ZU tier. I really like Sandaconda as a Pokemon. I think it has a fantastic design. I'm a big fan of snake Pokemon generally speaking, and so this actually is probably my favorite snake, and it beats out Arbok for that. So Sandaconda has such cool ground typing. Usually snakes are poison. Of course, you got something like Superior, which is grass, and that's a bit different too. But this ground typing is really cool for it. I love Mono Ground as a typing. Some of my favorite Pokemon are Mono Ground, and it's got such good abilities. Ignore Sand Veil. Sand Veil is not a good ability, but Sand Spit, really cool, especially in something like BSS. And Shed Skin, of course, is the signature snake ability. Of course, a couple other Pokemon get it like Scrafty, but basically snakes get it, and it's very, fun ability. It lets you set up with coil, and as opposed to, remember we talked about another slithery boy, which is Orthworm. Orthworm would love to have Shed Skin because as soon as it gets burned, it really is out of commission unless it's that Resto Chesto set. And Sandaconda doesn't need to run Resto Chesto. It can run Coil Leftovers. Similarly to Orthworm, it really benefits from the accuracy boost because you can use Earthquake and Stone Edge. And now you have an accurate Edge Quake, and one of them at least is Stab, which is fantastic. And frankly, I don't think you even wanted to have both of them be Stab because Rock Ground is pretty bad typing. You'd much prefer to just be Mono Ground and cut your losses. Then there's your last move. You have all sorts of options, right? You can run Glare. Of course, a lot of times you have the Scale Shot, and then you can be Terra Dragon. And that is a really awesome set. So Sandaconda has a lot of different options it can run. Of course, you don't have to be offensive. You can be defensive with Stealth Rock and Glare, and you're just being really annoying. You can even run Rock Blast if you really need to. And these kinds of sets were the things we used to see in early gen Enyo. And that was more when Enyo was fun because we got to run Sandaconda. And now Sandaconda can't stand up to the immense power of Enyo now that a lot of the other guys have dropped down. I would like to see Sandaconda make a return because, like I said, it is a Pokemon that I really liked from Gen 8. And so crazy to me after playing with it in Enyo for so long to see it all the way down in Zeal with all these good things going for it. If we look at its stats, that sort of in large part shows the reason why. You know, your HP is middling at best, your attack is passable, but it's nothing to write home about. Your defense is lower than Orthworm's, and it's good. That's about all you can say about it. Its SPDF is not very good, and its speed is interesting, but unless you are running an offensive Scale Shot set, it's not really that crazy. It's not a bad Pokemon by any stretch of the imagination, and it's got a fantastic ability. Great moves for what it's trying to do. Actually, even a Fire Fang. And you've got, what else did you get? Like a Poison Tail. I don't know. So in theory, you can't even necessarily be walled by Corviknight. You do have Body Press, which is interesting coming off of that defense stat, but I don't know how worth that is usually, even with Coil. So yeah, Sandaconda, sort of crazy to see it down all the way in Zeal. I obviously wasn't expecting it to be a great Pokemon, but Enyo, or even Pio, I would expect it to be, not Zeal. Now Electros, another snaky boy. Electros is also in Zeal. Most of the guys on this list are in Zeal, which is why it's so surprising to see them down all the way at the bottom. Electros is another NU staple. It's a perennially like niche Pokemon in the sense that it has no weaknesses at all. Isn't that crazy, yo? And despite having no weaknesses, unfortunately it only has one stab option, and that stab option is not very good. It does have 105 special attacks, so technically you can run a special set, but you have no way to boost your special attack really. I do think maybe, yeah, I guess Charge Beam. So if you want to meme, you can run Charge Beam. But we're not memeing here, so it has no way to boost the special attack. Whereas you do get Coil and Drain Punch if you run physical, which is really compelling. So pick your poison. You can run Assault Vest. You can run mixed sets because you're not really using that 50 base speed. Electros is the ultimate potential Pokemon because it has, look at that, great attack stats both ways. 80, 80, 80 isn't great, but in the lower tiers, usually it should be enough to invest, especially because you're only usually investing in one stat, and then your HP, or your speed stat is a throwaway stat, so you never invest in it anyway. You have like max HP plus one attack stat, or max HP plus SPDF, and you run Assault Vest or something. And you have so many cool things that you can do. You have knockoff, right? So you have utility, you have liquidation for ground types. So they're not necessarily walling you, unless it's Gastrodon, I suppose. The Gastrodon would have to fear a special Giga Drain set. Now Electros does run into a couple problems. First of all, it gets whittled down fairly easily with things like Toxic. And as anybody who's ever tried to run Mega Electros in Champions will tell you, Electros is actually not very bulky and usually will crumple to a few hits if they're sufficiently powerful. And of course, in Champions, because there are no tiers, you are having to face down against the strong guys. But even in lower tiers, right, if I run into a choice band Passimian, how much am I taking from close combat on switch-in? I can't be a switch-in to Pokemon, so I can only ever come in when I have a free switch-in, which isn't really that great. So you're not that bulky. Again, Assault Vest sets come to mind, but really the big problem for Electros is that it isn't that bulky, and because even though you don't have any weaknesses, you don't really have any useful resistances. You only resist electric and steel, and like, what are you doing with that? So, not great. And so, really, your attacks are fantastic. Like most Pokemon would kill. It would give up like 40 base stat points just to have this spread of moves. It's insane coverage options, but you just don't have the stats or the typing to really make it work. So the Pokemon that inspired this video is Toxicroak, and I recently saw that the ZU tier was testing Toxicroak, and I had to ask myself, wait, Toxicroak is ZU? And funnily enough, by the time that I actually got around to recording this video, Toxicroak had already been tested and deemed not ban-worthy for ZU. Now, I'm sure the 15 people that played the ZU tier and voted on it have something to say about it, but the fact that Toxicroak is good enough to be in ZU is sort of crazy to me. Now, Toxicroak is interesting because looking at its stats, it isn't great, right? 106 attack being your best stat, and I'm supposed to take you seriously as a Pokemon, is what you might initially think, but Toxicroak actually has always been a reasonably good Pokemon. It has an amazing ability in Dry Skin. It could also run Poison Touch if you want to be cheeky. And its moves have always made up for it. You've got Close Combat, you've got EQ, which often comes into play. You've got Knockoff, you've got Sucker Punch, and that's been its physical bread and butter, besides the fact that you also get Swords Dance, right? So that 106 attack stat looking mighty scary when I've got that Life Orb on, or whatever other item I may particularly want in this case. And a lot of times in these tiers, you'll have water types that will just be completely shut down by Toxicroak. So of course Toxicroak famously has been good in the past in things like Keldeo and Toxapex. So it has a role because of the combination of its unique typing. And I don't mean unique as in if no other Pokemon have it, but I mean as in like what, 2 other Pokemon have it? So that plus Dry Skin actually makes it very compelling as a Pokemon. Poison is great defensive typing, and Poison Fighting is a great combination offensively because the fighting types don't like the fairies, and Poison is good into it. Plus you have Knock Sucker for all the ghost types. You can also run special sets if you want, and special sets are a little bit weaker in power because you don't have the close combat, and your special attack is weaker, but it is also quite compelling at times depending on what's in the tier. And so to see Toxicroak, which has been a really useful utility mon in so many tiers in the past, and it's all the way down in ZU, like I know this stat line isn't really compelling anymore. And I know that power creep is a thing, but at the same time, we endured 2 generations of Mega Pokemon and Ultra Beasts and all sorts of other things. And Toxicroak was still valuable in those generations. So the fact that Toxicroak is all the way down here is really shocking to me. Let's talk about Mesprit. Mesprit is one of many fairy psychic types that turn into fairy types. It's doing the same thing as all the other ones are doing. So I'm running Draining Kiss, I'm running Calm Mind, I'm running Psyshock, or whatever, Psychic Noise maybe, depending on what I want. You can run Encore, you can run whatever you want there, it's fine. This kind of set with a Terra Fairy seems like it's so good. You even have, let's see what else we got here. You have Ice Beam technically, I guess, or T-Bolt. So obviously you're not going to break through something like Heatran. I'm not necessarily expecting you to break through Heatran. You may want some kind of ground move in case you have to run into like a Skuntank or something, I guess. But for the most part, especially once you've broken their team, Draining Kiss is still 60 base power plus then stab. That's pretty good. And then your psychic move of choice. And so many other Pokemon this generation have used it and been sort of broken with it, right? You had Mew doing it. Mew used to be an Enyo. That was one of the times when I was still playing Enyo, and I stopped playing Enyo for a bit there when Mew was in the tier because it was just so broken. Now, of course, Mew has a lot more sets than Mesprit does, but that was one of its best ones. And of course, you also see it with Uxie and Enyo. So Uxie can do it in Enyo. Of course, Uxie's stat line is a bit different from Mesprit's. Mesprit is actually, funnily enough, slower than Uxie, so that comes into play. And it's much less bulky, because, 130, 130. But it has a little more HP to make up for it, and depending on how you invest, you can more or less reach Uxie's stat line. And also, of course, you're much more imminently threatening with the special attack, so, maybe you don't want to run this. You run the stored power set, you run the weakness policy, you run the whatever else you want to run here to make yourself more scary. I don't know, Nasty Plot, I suppose you could also run, and then you wouldn't have to worry about the Calm Mind. Actually, you probably would want to run Nasty Plot most of the time. And so Mew is currently Ryu, and it was UU for a point, I believe. Uxie is still Enyo, which is fine. I don't know if this is exactly the set that makes Uxie such a threat in Enyo. But the funny thing is that Mesprit, even in previous gens, was at least PU because it always had utility, right? It was running a Choice Scarf set with Trick. It was running Nasty Plot Sweeper sets in a low-powered tier. And this gen, with the addition of the Terra Fairy Draining Kiss set, I would have thought that would have saved Mesprit. It's not going to be crazy strong. I understand that. But it should have been a little bit better than that, I would have thought. Also, let's not neglect the fact that you had Terra Blast. I say had Terra Blast because you no longer have Terra Blast. It is banned. Because OU decided to ban it, and that means everybody has to ban it. Really stupid. But the point is that you used to have Terra Blast, and you could have ran Terra Blast ground, and then you would have had ground coverage. And then you didn't have to run Draining Kiss, you could run Dazzling Gleam, and some other set, Psyshock or whatever. Or even Mystical Power, right? Let's not forget it has this new move, which does miss more often than you would think for 90% accurate move, but it has 100% chance to raise your attack by a stage. So that, you would think, would sort of make this Pokemon better. And yet, here we are. Food for thought. Now let's talk about Vikavolt. Vikavolt is perhaps not surprising to many of you. Vikavolt did lose Roost, and so when you don't have Roost, you're going to be a lot worse of a Pokemon. I am aware of that, and that's something I've come to accept about Vikavolt. Such a cool bug Pokemon, such a cool stat line, except for the speed maybe, but even with the speed, you could be a Trick Room guy, right? You're just Galvantula, but you actually do damage. And Levitate's not even a bad ability on it, although wouldn't it be cool if it got something like, I don't know, Mega Launcher, but now it just launches all of its moves. Just give it adaptability, I don't care. Then it would just hit like a truck, right? If it's got adaptability, it would absolutely be used on Trick Room. Because this special attack stat is one you usually only see on Mega Pokemon, not normal Pokemon. And that's the reason why I am always surprised to see Vikavolt this low. Now, as a Vikavolt enjoyer, I have tried to use it before with agility sets. It never works out, and so I've sort of learned the reason why. The main reason why is that it never really can get an agility boost more than once, and even with 43, if you want to actually invest in it, be fast with agility, you can't really run your HP, and this stat line is not inspiring confidence in living more than maybe one hit at most. So if you live a hit, then you get the agility up, and you'll still be outsped by their Choice Scarfer. So you'll get like maybe a kill, and that's if you can. You also have to choose your moves. So you're going to run Thunderbolt, you're gonna run Bug Buzz, you're gonna run Energy Ball, right? The same as you would if you were running Galvantula. So that's not fantastic into certain Pokemon, but it is usually quite decent, right? So now let's talk about the other thing the Vikavolt does, the thing that people usually use it for, which is Sticky Web. You can run a Sticky Web and then a Volt Switch pivot set. This was so much better when you used to be able to run Roost. Of course, you can't do that anymore. Now you run maybe like Discharge or something, and then you run a bulky set, and that's sort of fine. And you don't even have to invest in your defense stat or your special attack stat because, like, did you see that special attack stat? Most Pokemon have this at max investment in those tiers. But let's look at Sticky Web and see which Pokemon have it and which tiers they fall into. So first of all, Sticky Web is a playstyle not looking so hot. The top one is an Ario. Now that usually is a sign of a healthier metagame because any of these could be used in OU if they wanted to, or in UU if they wanted to. But usually when Ribombee is in OU, that's a sign of a volatile metagame that can be easily set up on by HO. And Webs usually implies HO. I wish it didn't. I wish you could have a more balanced playstyle with Webs, but usually it's confined to HO. Then, if we go to PU, you got Araquanid and Galvantula. Well, Araquanid has the immense power of Vikavolt thanks to Water Bubble, plus it has superior typing. So, you have Araquanid with the myriad blessings of Water Bubble and the better typing. Overall, it's a better Weber. You also have like Endeavor with Custap Berry and things like that, so that's sort of cool. Okay, Galvantula is worse Vikavolt in every way except for the speed stat. And so the speed stat really is what makes Galvantula stand up compared to Vikavolt because Vikavolt is slow and Galvantula is not slow. And usually you want to get up your webs before you get taunted or before you get KO'd. And Galvantula usually can do that if it needs to. Which is also why Ribombee is the #1 pick because it can't be fake outed and it goes at first almost all the time. Then in the ZU tier is where you have the real bottom of the barrel stuff, right? Ariados, not a single stat above 90. Kricketune, which has not a stat above 85. That BST is like, what is Kirlia? I guess Kirlia is worse. I guess I can't make fun of you too much. Okay, Leavanny actually is sort of surprising to me. I would think that Leavanny would be a little bit better just because you have Swords Dance and Triple Axle. It seems like you could have made something work with this guy. And it's decently fast, but you know, whatever. 4 times weak to Bug, 4 times weak to Flying, weak to Stealth Rock. It's bad time. Masquerain is usually just a Sticky Weber. Usually it's not trying to Quiver Dance up. Spidops is cute because it's got the stakeout, but usually people aren't too scared of Spidops either. And when your best stat is your defense stat, it's not looking great. Vikavolt is like the strongest guy out of all of these. And maybe it's the most useful. In fact, I don't even know if that's true because Leavanny is sitting right there. But, you know, I won't hate Leavanny too much. It's probably the best positioned out of all of these guys to actually get up webs, so that sort of makes sense. But just looking at that, the fact that webs, the best one is an Ario, and it just drops off from there, sort of tells you the value that webs brings. And if Vikavolt doesn't have webs, or if webs isn't valuable, then Vikavolt, without Roost, and without having valuable webs, well, what value does it have? And I guess that's the reason why it's all the way down in ZU. Whimsicott is up next, and if you played VGC, you would be sick and tired of seeing this little puffball. Whimsicott is sort of a cute Pokemon. It's alright in my book. It is really annoying though. And you would think that annoyance would translate even in singles to some kind of success. Of course, you can run the really annoying and trolly Leech Seed substitute sets because then you can just stall out a lot of Pokemon. You can run Encore, and this is really annoying. Another funny thing is that Whimsicott, being a prankster Pokemon, usually prankster Pokemon sort of get shut down by dark types, but because it's a prankster fairy type, it doesn't care about most dark types. unless your name is Lil Muck or something. Usually Whimsicott does quite well into them. Of course, this isn't the only set you can run, but it's a pretty good one. My personal favorite set to run on Whimsicott is just a pivot set, right? Because if I don't want my opponent to ever be able to set up, unless I guess they're dark type, then all I have to do is just have this guy in my back pocket. I have a slow pivot guy. They pivot into Whimsicott on the setup. Now you can't set up. I have Encore. Checkmate. So that's a really annoying set. And then this last one could be Giga Drain, or it can be whatever the heck you want it to be. That doesn't matter. Point is that this Prankster ability, super annoying. Don't need stats where we're going. We've got Prankster and Fairy typing. And I am genuinely shocked the Whimsicott is this low. Who cares that it's 4 times weak to poison? Who's using poison moves? Now, if we look in the tiers, and we'll just have to scroll down because I'm not going to change the tier for this thing. Obviously, there are a bunch of good Pokemon in these tiers that are going to give you a hard time. Obviously, Tentacruel is a great Pokemon, and I actually really like running Tentacruel with Whimsicott. This one is weak to ground, this one resists ground. They both shut down fighting types, and then they help for each other's coverage. Of course, you resist poison here, and it can absorb toxic spikes. Also, ice moves and fire moves for Whimsicott. So they really do well with each other, I think. And then this has the flip turn into the U-turn. So pretty cool, and they both provide good utility for the team. Of course, it's not a foolproof strat, but it was one I was using for a while there, and it was really nice. I really liked it. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm surprised it's Whimsicott in ZU. I wasn't expecting it to be even in UU, but at least, in NU, I would expect Whimsicott to hang out there. But if we look at it, of course, the aforementioned Tentacruel, you can't Giga Drain it, it's got Liquid Ooze, Moonblast is going to bounce off, and it doesn't really care about Encore. The Rotom Heat being in this tier is sort of annoying to it, and then you've got other Pokemon, I guess, like Bullfish and even something like Dragalge. It's mostly poison types that are gonna mess with it. Overqwil, of course, is in this tier. Something like Goodra, you think Moonblast is good into it, but then Goodra is a Solfest, Sludge Bombs, KO's doing, you do like 30% with Moonblast. It's not actually free as much as you would think it is. Yeah, the Pokemon like Bellibolt and Bronzong, which are actually both sort of annoying into Whimsicott. Although I guess that depends on the set sometimes. And so if we look in the tiers, there's a lot of Pokemon that sort of shut it down. And where's Muck right now? Yeah, Alolan Muck is in Ario. That's what I thought it was. So if you were to say, oh, it could rise up to Ario, well, that Pokemon's just going to give it a bad time. But that same kind of mentality where I'm just a poison type, I come and I wall you. Or even I'm just a bulky electric type, like Bellibolt, and I'm just going to come in and wall you and be annoying. That is sort of what Whimsicott really doesn't like. Funnily enough, Serena sort of gives it a hard time too, especially if it's a bulky synthesis set. So there's always going to be a few Pokemon in the tier that are actually genuinely good. Amoonguss, there's another one, that are going to just come in and shut it down. We can actually look at some of the lower tiers, and now that we're talking outside of just a vacuum, we can sort of see that, we got Amoonguss down here, we got Arcanine, which, meme Pokemon at times, noob crap at times, but still, look at the PST, it's pretty strong. You've got Chansey all the way down in PU, and if Chansey's in PU, that sort of tells you something. And so if these guys are down here, and Ninetales is PU, then Whimsicott being down this low, I guess isn't that surprising. But considering how annoying you can make this Pokemon, and the fact that you can just slot it onto any annoying team, there's got to be untapped potential for Whimsicott. Now let's talk about Weezing. Weezing is also, again, in ZU. And then we're not talking about Galarian Weezing, we're talking about normal Weezing. Now, normal Weezing has not been a great Pokemon for many generations, but it has got neutralizing gas now, which does have its benefits, and of course also keeps Levitate, which is a fantastic ability for a defensive poison type. Now, you run Sludge Bomb or Toxic or whatever you want, you always get the Will-O-Wisp or the Flamethrower, and having these kinds of moves on a defensive Pokemon is fantastic. You also do have some form of recovery in Pin Split. It's not the greatest form of recovery, to be honest, because usually what ends up happening is you're not able to KO the Pokemon in front of you, so you'll just have to whittle them down as they try to whittle you down, and then either you KO them, but then you're like at 20% or less, or they KO you, and then you can come out and revenge kill the Pokemon. So usually it ends up being more of a trade, which is not as good as you might otherwise like. Another Pokemon with low base stats, but because you don't really have to worry about what you're doing, it's always just put this here, put this here, put this here, and you're done. I mean, I guess you could run a Spadef Weezing if you want to be troll, but it really is just a set. And then you run Black Sludge or Leftovers because you're going to tear it. And there you go, boom, done. It really has a good utility because it's not a fighting resist that worries about knockoff. And that's what poison mostly does. If you wanted to absorb toxic spikes, you can run neutralized gas, which can also be reasonably useful. Like if we go down to the PU tier, let's just say we were trying to get this to move up one tier. Well, okay, if I got neutralizing gas, then I stop Slowbro's regen. I can stop Guts from Hariyama and Heracross, right? Those are the main things actually, because you want to come in on the fighting type. Heracross, Hariyama, both scary Guts Pokemon. You can come on Decidueye, you're not going to do anything with neutralizing gas, I suppose. But there are a few fighting types in this tier that you really would like to beat. You can also stop regen from Amoonguss, right? Weezing has had utility in higher tiers previously, but the fact that it's all the way down here, again, looking at its base stats, maybe you'd say that's not too surprising. Surprising to me, Weezing has been a pretty strong Pokemon traditionally in the lower tiers defensively, and especially if you got like a Wish Vaporeon or something, that guy will live forever. Finally, let's talk about Venusaur. Venusaur is in Zeal. What is it doing in Zeal? Do you remember what Venusaur does? Chlorophyll, Earth Power, Giga Drain, or Solar Beam, or whatever. Weather Ball, Growth. Can somebody explain to me what happened to Sun Venusaur? Like, I know I'm not maybe the most in touch with metagame shift or whatever, and I know that maybe the stat line isn't the most powerful, but I remember back in Gen 8, let's take a look. Where was Venusaur in Gen 8? Trying to remember. Yeah, it was UU. Okay. So now in this generation, where Sun is actually a viable strat, because let's say I wanted to run like Torkoal, right? Torkoal, and we're going to run a few Proto guys. So we're going to run the Raging Bolt, obviously, and the Great Tusk. Now I'm a little bit Ice Weak, so let's see. Any other Proto guys I want? Let's just double check. I mean, we could put on the Walking Wake. Why the heck not? And then we'll put on a Fire type just to make me a little bit less weak to the Ice types. We'll put on Iron Moth, and then we just hope we don't run into Kyurem, I guess, is the main thing. Just don't run into Kyurem with this team. But and maybe that's the reason why. I don't know. Maybe you need something to deal with Kyurem instead of Venusaur on this team. But Venusaur does really nicely in Sun. So I'm not really sure why we don't see Venusaur. Now maybe it's just because it only does well on Sun. Maybe that's the problem. Where's Ninetales? Ninetales is in Zeal. What? How is Ninetales in Zeal? Okay, so I'm not sure why Venusaur isn't being used in UU, because Ninetales is perfectly legal in UU. I just checked. Heat Rock, Drought, that totally works in UU. It's always hard to tell exactly where it starts getting banned. I don't know if it's NU, probably it's NU, usually that's where it starts. But yeah, and I do remember NU was broken there for a while when Sun was allowed and Ninetales was down there because Skullvillain was running everywhere. But in UU it's totally fine. And so you could totally run Venusaur. in UU with the other photosynthesis guys that are down here and that are good. You could run Arcanine here, you could run Hydreigon so you don't lose to ground types or whatever. You could only make this work. I'm sure there's a more optimized HO for Sun in UU. And you could probably run it on even more just bulky offense Sun if that's your poison of choice. Because Ninetales isn't bad, right? You got that speed tier, and in a pinch, it can totally be serviceable. I'm really not sure why. Is it because Latios is in the tier or something? I have absolutely no clue why. Venusaur isn't good. But even beyond just the sunset, even the sunset, even if we just ignore Chlorophyll as an ability and we just wanted to go with Overgrow, right? This is as bulky as Amoonguss basically is, or Vileplume, depending on how you invest in it. The Amoonguss might actually not be correct. The Vileplume is. And you can run the bulky Giga Drain, Leech Seed sets. You can run Earth Power if you want still. That way you're not walled by the Steel types. And Sludge Bomb or Synthesis, what have you. Right, that's not awful. And so you would think that it would have some utility in being a fighting type check, but it's not. And this is the one that I thought was most surprising. So again, if you do know why Sun is not good in the lower tiers right now, please let me know. Why Venusaur is not good is probably because why Sun is not good. But even in OU, I think Venusaur should have a place. It was rocking OU last gen. So yeah, I just thought I'd make a video today talking about some of these Zeomons and how the heck they ended up all the way down here, because it was surprising to me. But that'll be it for today's video, and I'll catch you guys next time.